Okay, guys, I'm going to make a short video on price elasticity of demand. Hopefully, this will go about 10 minutes. Uh, Price elasticity of demand is one of the most important concepts that we will discuss in microeconomics. And to put a fine point on it, it is how responsive quantity demand is to a change in price. And we'll get into the mathematics here in a couple of minutes. But why do we want to know about this? It's really important from a business standpoint to have an understanding of how consumers view your product so that you make appropriate pricing decisions. If a product is one that consumers really don't need and will walk away from easily, then you don't have the ability to raise prices and maintain your revenues in the same way that you would if the product was more inelastic. Okay. And so when we talk about these terms, elastic, inelastic, we're talking about responsiveness. So if we look at this in terms of a demand curve, this is a perfectly inelastic curve here, meaning it is completely vertical. And so we can change the price to anything and we do not move the quantity. Whereas at the other extreme, we are only going to accept the one price for the product, and any variance, the product falls apart. And then there's shades of gray in between those extremes. When we think about the mathematics behind it, uh, it's really calculated as the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. A lot of the intro textbooks will use a midpoint formula where we look at the average change of a line segment. And so the top part here represents the average change in quantity. The bottom part here represents the average change in price. You divide this by that, and you will get a number that ranges from 0 to infinity. Now, if you're between 0 and 1, you're in what's called the inelastic range. And in this range, if you raise the price on the product, total revenues will increase. In this range, one above 1, this is the elastic range. So if you raise the price, you're going to decrease total revenues. Now, what are some factors that come into play here? Oops, one too many. What are some factors that will account for elasticity? One is the size of the purchase relative to income. So if the item is relatively cheap relative to how much money you make, you're not going to be that responsive to a change in price. So, for example, if the price of a pack of gum goes up 20%, you're probably not even going to notice it and continue to buy it as you would. Anyway, if the price of your mortgage goes up 20%, that is going to be noticeable. Okay. The second thing is really important, and this is the amount of time that you have to make a purchase decision. So, time creates more elasticity generally. So if I have to fly to California tomorrow for a funeral, I am not going to have as much flexibility in my pricing of the airfare as I would a trip that I'm planning to take months later. Okay. A third factor is the item a need or is it a want? So, for example, insulin is something that diabetics need to maintain their health, and Nike Air Maxes are luxuries that people like to have. They're nice things. And then the final factor that I like to discuss is price and availability of substitutes. If there are a lot of options in the market for a product, then it's likely going to be a more elastic product rather than inelastic. Again, if we think about common things like medication, well, there may not be a lot of substitutes in the market for somebody's heart medication. And so they're not price sensitive. If the price goes up, they've still got to buy their medication, as opposed to something like a specific brand of sneakers, where if the price goes up, you may switch to something else. So if Nikes all of a sudden are $300 a pair, you may switch to Under Armour, you may switch to Adidas, something else. Okay? Now, going on from there, an important thing that you really want to keep in mind is that elasticity, we can measure it for a market. So, for example, we can look at metadata and see, okay, Walmart raised the price of Tide by this much and their sales went down by that much. What's their PED? Okay, we could do that math. The point I want to make, though, is these decisions also are individually based. So, in other words, something that is very inelastic to me may be more elastic to someone else. Just a sample worksheet that I use in my face to face classes that shows here's your quantity demanded here, here's the price. And what this column does is it's looking at, well, what's the price elasticity of demand as we move from this price to that price. And so here our PED is minus 1.66. And the important thing you got to keep in mind here is that this number here is greater than 1. So 1.66, that means we are in the elastic range. So if we're in the elastic range, lowering the price should increase total revenues. And we can verify this by looking at total revenue here. When the quantity, when the price is $4, we sell 800 units. That gets us total revenue of 3,200. When we drop the price to 350, we can sell 1,000 units. That gets us total revenues of 3,500. So in this case, lowering the price increased total revenues. What if we go down to $3? Well, here we're still elastic because the number here is greater than 1. Lowering the price increased total revenues. Now, if we were to lower it down to 250, now we're getting into the inelastic range because there's a 0 before the decimal. And so lowering the price will actually decrease our total revenues. Okay.